Most people believe the secret to happiness is more success, more positivity, and more achievement. But what if that idea is completely wrong? What if the real secret to a better life is caring less about most things and only caring deeply about a few things that truly matter? In this powerful book, author Mark Manson explains why trying too hard to be happy actually makes us miserable, why failure is necessary for success, and why learning to say no might be the most important life skill you can develop. This is the summary of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. And by the end of this video, you might completely change the way you think about happiness, success, and life itself. Big idea of the book. The big idea of this book is simple but powerful. Life will always have problems. Pain and struggle are unavoidable. But the quality of your life depends on which problems you choose to care about. Most people waste their energy worrying about things that don't really matter. Other people's opinions, social media validation, being perfect, impressing everyone. But the happiest people focus only on what truly matters. Meaningful goals, real relationships, personal growth, purpose. The secret to a good life is not giving a F about everything. It is about giving a F about the right things. Chapter 1. Do not try. In this chapter, Mark Manson explains that self-improvement and success are often connected, but they are not the same thing. Our culture constantly tells us to be happier, healthier, richer, smarter, and more successful. We're told to become the best version of ourselves. But when you really think about it, most self-help advice focuses on what we don't have. Because of this, we start believing that something is always missing in our lives. Mark explains an idea called the backward law, introduced by philosopher Alan Watts. This law says that trying too hard to feel positive can actually make us feel negative. But accepting negative experiences can sometimes lead to positive results. For example, failing in business can teach you valuable lessons that help you succeed later. Avoiding pain or problems does not make life better. In fact, trying to escape suffering often creates more suffering. Denying failure is still a failure, and hiding shame only creates more shame. Mark then explains the real meaning of not giving a F. It does not mean being careless or indifferent. It simply means choosing what truly matters in your life. You should not say, F it, to everything. Instead, you should say it only to things that are not important. Your energy should be saved for the things that truly matter, like family, friends, values, and purpose. Another important point is that life will always have problems. Even if you solve one problem, another one will appear. If people have no problems, their minds will start creating new ones. That is why the goal is not to remove problems from life, but to find problems that are meaningful and worth solving. Mark also says that whether we realize it or not, we always choose what to care about. When we are young, everything feels extremely important. But as we grow older and gain experience, we become more selective about what deserves our attention. The purpose of this book is to help us think more clearly about what truly matters and what does not. The book teaches us how to turn pain into a tool, trauma into strength, and problems into better problems. Mark gives some simple examples. People try to learn how to make more money because they already feel they don't have enough. People repeat positive affirmations like, I am beautiful, because deep down they feel insecure. People look for dating advice because they believe they are not lovable. People imagine success through visualization because they feel they are not successful yet. But truly confident people do not need to prove their confidence. A rich person does not need to constantly convince others that they are rich. Either you are something or you are not. If we keep dreaming about becoming something, we may actually be reminding ourselves that we are not that yet. Mark explains that giving too many F's about everything can damage our mental health. The key to a good life is not caring about more things, but caring about fewer things that truly matter. He also introduces the idea of the feedback loop from hell. This happens when we start feeling bad about our negative emotions. For example, we feel anxious, and then we become anxious about being anxious. We feel guilty, and then we feel guilty about feeling guilty. This creates a cycle of stress and self-criticism. According to Mark, many people today are trapped in this loop, which makes them overly stressed, overly self-critical, and mentally exhausted. The solution is simple. Stop trying to avoid negative emotions. Accepting negative experiences can actually make life easier. Philosopher Albert Camus once said that you will never be happy if you keep searching for what happiness is. And you will never truly live if you spend your life looking for the meaning of life. The main message of this chapter is simple. A good life is not about caring about everything. It is about choosing carefully what truly deserves your attention and energy. Chapter 2. Happiness is a problem. In this chapter, Mark Manson explains an idea inspired by the story of Gautama Buddha. The main idea is simple. Life will always include suffering and dissatisfaction. These are natural parts of being human. Instead of trying to eliminate problems completely, we should understand that problems are a normal part of life. Mark explains that suffering exists for a biological reason. It pushes us to change, grow, and improve. Humans are naturally wired to feel dissatisfied with what they already have and to desire something better. This constant dissatisfaction is what drives progress. Mark also talks about two types of pain: physical pain and psychological pain. Physical pain is important because it protects us. It tells us when something is wrong and helps us understand our limits. Psychological pain works in a similar way. Emotional pain, such as rejection, failure, or disappointment, teaches us valuable lessons. It helps us avoid repeating the same mistakes in the future. Mark then explains an important truth about life. Problems never completely disappear. When we solve one problem, a new one usually appears. Because of this, we should not hope for a life without problems. That kind of life does not exist. Instead, we should aim for better problems, problems that are meaningful and worth solving. According to Mark, happiness comes from solving problems. When we work on challenges and find solutions, we feel progress and satisfaction. But when we try to avoid problems completely, life starts to feel empty and frustrating. Happiness is not something that suddenly appears. It is something we experience while working through challenges and improving our lives. In other words, happiness is an ongoing process, not a final destination. Mark also explains why many people struggle with their problems. The first reason is denial. Some people refuse to accept that they have problems. They ignore reality, which may feel comfortable for a short time, but it eventually leads to insecurity and emotional stress. The second reason is victim mentality. Some people believe their problems are caused only by other people or circumstances. Because of this belief, they feel powerless to change anything. This attitude often leads to anger, frustration, and helplessness. The truth is that our struggles shape our success. The problems we face today often lead to better opportunities and new challenges in the future. Life will always contain problems, but as we grow and improve, our problems also improve. And those better problems often lead to a better and more meaningful life. Chapter 3. You are not special. In this chapter, Mark Manson talks about the true meaning of self-esteem. He explains that simply feeling good about yourself does not mean much unless you have real reasons to feel that way. Mark shares the example of a person named Jimmy. Jimmy believes he is amazing and special, but he does not actually work on his weaknesses. Because of this, his confidence is based only on feelings, not reality. Mark says the problem with the modern self-esteem movement is that it teaches people to always feel positive about themselves. But real self-worth does not come from ignoring our flaws. True self-esteem comes from being honest about our weaknesses and working to improve them. For example, a person might realize that they are careless with money, exaggerate their achievements, or depend too much on others. When someone accepts these flaws and tries to improve them, their self-worth becomes stronger and more genuine. But people who refuse to admit their problems cannot improve their lives in any meaningful way. Mark also explains an uncomfortable truth: most of our problems are not unique. If you are struggling with something, it is very likely that millions of other people have experienced the same thing before, and many will experience it in the future. This simply means that we are not as special as we sometimes believe. At first, this idea might sound negative, but Mark says it is actually freeing. When we stop trying to feel special all the time, we can focus on doing meaningful work and improving ourselves. Becoming truly great at something requires a huge amount of time, effort, and dedication. Because our time and energy are limited, very few people become exceptional at many things. Most people will become truly great at only one thing, or sometimes none at all. There is a famous idea that if everyone were extraordinary, then no one would actually be extraordinary. The real message of this chapter is simple. Instead of trying to feel special all the time, we should focus on being honest about our flaws, improving ourselves, and putting effort into what truly matters. Chapter 4. The Value of Suffering. In this chapter, Mark Manson explains that suffering is a normal and unavoidable part of life. Instead of asking, "How can I stop suffering?" we should ask a better question: why am I suffering, and what is the purpose behind it? Understanding the purpose of our suffering requires self-awareness. Mark compares self-awareness to an onion with multiple layers. The first layer is becoming aware of our emotions. This means recognizing simple feelings such as what makes us happy, what makes us sad, and what gives us hope. The second layer is asking why we feel those emotions. When we question our feelings, we start to understand the deeper reasons behind them. This helps us discover the real causes of our stress, anger, or disappointment. Once we understand the root cause, we can begin to change our behavior or perspective. The third layer of self-awareness is understanding our values. This means asking questions like, why do I consider something a success or a failure? How do I measure my own worth? What standards do I use to judge myself and other people? Mark explains that our values are extremely important because they shape the problems we experience in life. And the type of problems we deal with determines the overall quality of our life. If we have healthy values, we will face meaningful challenges that help us grow. But if our values are shallow or unhealthy, our problems will also become negative and unfulfilling. The main idea of this chapter is that suffering itself is not the real problem. What truly matters is the values and meaning we attach to our suffering. Chapter 5. You are always choosing. In this chapter, Mark Manson explains an important truth. We are always choosing our problems. The difference between a painful problem and a meaningful challenge is the feeling that we chose it. When we believe we chose our struggles, we feel strong and in control. But when we think problems are being forced on us, we start to feel like victims, and life begins to feel unfair and miserable. Mark says that taking responsibility gives us power. The more responsibility we accept for our life, the more control we gain over it. Accepting responsibility is often the first step to solving any problem. Many people avoid responsibility because they confuse it with fault. In our culture, responsibility and blame are often seen as the same thing. Because of this, people think that if they take responsibility for a problem, it means the problem is completely their fault. But Mark explains that responsibility and fault are not the same thing. Many things in life may not be our fault. Other people, circumstances, or bad luck may have created the situation. But how we respond to that situation is always our responsibility. Nobody else can control how we think, how we react, or what we choose to value. Most people are happy to take responsibility for their success and happiness, but they avoid taking responsibility for their problems and struggles. However, real personal growth begins when we stop blaming everything around us and start asking, "What can I do about this?" When we accept responsibility for our problems, we also gain the power to change them and improve our lives. Let me explain you this in example. Imagine two people who both lose their jobs. The first person says, "My life is ruined. Nothing good ever happens to me." The second person says, "This sucks, but maybe this is a chance to try something new." Both people experienced the same event, but the values they chose to focus on completely changed their lives. And that's exactly what Mark Manson talks about in this book. Now let's move to another powerful lesson. Chapter 6. You are wrong about everything. So am I. In this chapter, Mark Manson explains a powerful idea. We are wrong about many things in our lives. We are often wrong about ourselves, other people, society, and even the world around us. Our beliefs and opinions keep changing as we grow and gain more experience. But many people become so obsessed with being right about everything that they forget to actually live their lives. Mark explains that people often say they are afraid of failure, rejection, or hearing the word no. But the deeper fear is something else. The real fear is uncertainty. Uncertainty means we do not always know the truth about ourselves. For example, we may not know if we are truly lovable, how attractive we are, or how successful we might become. And this uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. Because of this discomfort, many people try to protect their beliefs and avoid situations that might prove them wrong. But by doing this, they stop themselves from learning and growing. Mark explains that the only way to truly discover our potential is to accept uncertainty and stay open to new experiences. When we accept that we might be wrong, we allow ourselves to learn more, grow faster, and improve our lives. The main idea of this chapter is simple. Being willing to be wrong is actually the beginning of real wisdom and personal growth. Chapter 7. Failure is the way forward. In this chapter, Mark Manson explains that failure is a necessary part of success. Every improvement we make in life comes from many small failures. The more we fail and learn from it, the better we become. If someone is better than us at something, it is often because they have failed more times than we have. And if someone is worse, it may simply be because they have not yet gone through those difficult learning experiences. Mark gives the example of a child learning to walk. A child falls many times while learning, but the child never thinks, "Maybe walking is not for me." The child simply keeps trying until walking becomes natural. But as adults, many of us become afraid of failure. Because of that fear, we start avoiding challenges and opportunities that might make us fail. Mark explains that true success only comes when we are willing to fail. If we are too afraid of failure, we will never fully pursue success. Many people also try to escape uncomfortable emotions like pain, anger, or sadness. They quickly look for ways to feel good again even if it means going back to unhealthy habits or poor values. However, growth requires facing discomfort instead of avoiding it. Mark shares a lesson he learned from his math teacher. When students were stuck on a difficult problem, the teacher told them not to sit and overthink it. Instead, they should simply start working on it. Even if they did not know the solution, taking action would eventually lead them toward the answer. The message is simple: do something instead of doing nothing. Action itself creates progress. When we keep moving forward, even small failures begin to guide us toward improvement. In the end, failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path that leads to it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever cared so much about being right that you ruined a relationship? Or have you ever kept saying yes to people even when you wanted to say no? Think about it for a second, because this next lesson might completely change the way you handle relationships. Chapter 8: The Importance of Saying No. In this chapter, Mark Manson explains that a meaningful life requires commitment, and commitment always means saying no to many other options. We cannot give our time and energy to everything. To focus on what truly matters, whether it is a relationship, a belief, or a goal, we must reject other alternatives. By narrowing our choices, we create direction and purpose in life. Mark also explains that people cannot solve our problems for us, and trying to solve everyone else's problems will not make them happy either. Some people fall into the victim mindset. They constantly blame others for their emotions and problems. Deep down, they believe that someone will eventually come and save them, giving them the love and happiness they feel they deserve. On the other hand, some people become saviors. They try to fix everyone around them because they believe that helping others will make them feel loved and appreciated. But both of these behaviors create unhealthy relationships. For victims, the hardest thing is taking responsibility for their own lives. They have spent so much time believing others control their fate that accepting responsibility feels frightening. For savers, the hardest thing is stopping themselves from fixing other people's problems. They often feel valued only when they are helping others, so letting go of that role can also be uncomfortable. Mark explains that healthy relationships require strong boundaries. There is a big difference between doing something out of obligation and doing it voluntarily. One way to test the strength of a relationship is to ask yourself, what would happen if I said no? If saying no would create drama, guilt, or anger, then the relationship may be built on conditions rather than genuine acceptance. People with strong boundaries understand that it is impossible for two people to fulfill each other's needs all the time. Mark also explains that conflict is not always bad. In fact, conflict can build trust. When disagreements happen, they reveal who truly cares about us and who only stays for personal benefits. A healthy relationship requires both people to be comfortable saying no and hearing no. Finally, Mark explains that commitment creates freedom. When we commit to something important, we focus our energy and attention on what truly matters. This focus allows us to grow, improve, and achieve meaningful success in life. Chapter 9: And Then You Die. In this final chapter, Mark Manson talks about one uncomfortable truth: death. Most people are afraid of death. Because of that fear, we try to avoid thinking about it, talking about it, or even accepting it, even when someone close to us is dying. Mark discusses ideas from the book The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. Becker explains that every human being knows, deep down, that one day they will die. This awareness creates a deep fear inside us. To deal with that fear, people try to create a conceptual self, something that will live longer than their physical body. That is why many people try to leave a legacy by putting their names on buildings, writing books, creating businesses, or becoming famous. In a way, many of our ambitions come from the desire to feel like we will not completely disappear. In ancient cultures like those of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, people were often reminded to keep death in mind. This practice helped them stay humble and appreciate life more. Similarly, in Buddhism, meditation is sometimes used as a way to accept the reality of death while still living fully. Mark's message is simple. Instead of avoiding death, we should accept it. When we accept that our time is limited, we start focusing on what truly matters. We begin to question our ego, let go of unnecessary entitlement, face our fears, accept failure, and learn from rejection. Understanding that life will eventually end can actually make life more meaningful because it pushes us to spend our time on things that truly matter. Quick recap. Let's quickly recap the most powerful lessons from this book. Lesson 1. Stop trying to be perfect. Life improves when you focus only on what truly matters. Lesson 2. Happiness is not the absence of problems. It comes from solving meaningful problems. Lesson 3. You are not special, and that's okay. Accepting this actually makes life easier. Lesson 4. Suffering has value when it leads to growth. Lesson 5. You are always responsible for how you respond to life. Lesson 6. Being wrong is part of learning. Lesson 7. Failure is the path to mastery. Lesson 8. Learning to say no protects your time and energy. Lesson 9. Remember that life is temporary, and that is what makes it meaningful. Final message. At the end of the day, life is short. You will face struggles, failures, rejection, and uncertainty. That will never change. But what can change is what you choose to care about. Instead of trying to be perfect, instead of trying to impress everyone, focus on the few things that truly matter: your values, your relationships, your purpose. Because the moment you stop caring about everything, you finally start caring about the things that actually make life meaningful. If you enjoyed this summary, imagine what could happen if you actually applied just one idea from this book in your life. Books can change the way we think, but only action changes the way we live. So pick one lesson from today's video and start using it today. And if you enjoy learning powerful ideas from books without spending hours reading them, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because every week, we break down life-changing books into simple ideas you can actually use. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.